Julieanna Hever is also known as the plant-based dietitian. And that's because she is a passionate and compassionate advocate of the miracles associated with the following a whole food plant-based diet. Julieanna is the host of Very Living Network's What Would Julieanna Do? She's the author of the best-selling book, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition. She's the author of the brand new book, The Vegiterranean Diet. She is the nutrition columnist for Veg News magazine. She's the co-author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Gluten-Free Vegan Cooking. She has appeared on a whole lot of shows. She's been multiple times on the Dr. Oz show, the Steve Harvey show, the Marie Osmond show, Issues with Jane Velez Mitchell, TEDx Conejo, and many more. She counsels a variety of clients throughout the world from her Los Angeles, California-based private practice, including elite athletes, adults, and children with various nutritional and/or medical concerns. She's also a special consultant to the Forks Over Knives series, the documentary and the books, and she's contributed recipes to both of the Forks Over Knives books. Her recent work as executive director of EarthSave International provided an opportunity for her to bring whole food plant-based nutrition to the forefront of efforts to improve the current global health crisis. Julieanna is not just super energetic and super accomplished. She's a lot of fun, as you're going to learn soon, and it's a pleasure to welcome her to this conference. Please give a warm welcome to Julieanna Hever.
Thank you. How many of you have heard that the Mediterranean diet is the gold standard in the research? That's it? The Mediterranean diet. Check out all these headlines. It's the best, it's gonna cure everything. It's the best diet ever. US News Diets ranks it the top diet, year after year after year. But I stand here, like many of you, with my plant goggles on, and I look at the work of Drs. Dean Ornish, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. John McDougall, and I've seen how they can quite literally reverse advanced stage chronic disease like nothing else before. I also look at the work of the Blue Zones. How many of you have read Dan Buettner's The Blue Zones? Fabulous book. So for those of you that don't know, they looked at the cultures around the country, around the world, and they found the places with the most centenarians, the places where the longest lived people were. And they kind of studied their habits, their traditions, their lifestyle, and what's one thing they had in common? A plant-based diet. So I wonder, it begs the question, why aren't the media shouting from the rooftops, eat plants, plants are gonna save us? That's what I wanna hear. So about 2.5 years ago, I was asked to give a talk aboard a cruise in the Mediterranean. I know, tough gig. Twist my rubber arm, where do I sign up? So I packed my bags, I packed up my mom, and off we went to Rome to catch the boat. And of course I was thinking a lot about this, the Mediterranean diet. I'd read the studies, but really I'm so obsessed with plants, and the plant-based world just doesn't get the love that it deserves. It's starting to, but I was pontificating on this while we were sitting on this beautiful cruise and visiting these wonderful places. So one day I was sitting in the stateroom with my mom, and she likes to journal, so she was journaling about our trip, and I was just looking out at the beautiful sapphire waters and the beautiful islands that we were just kind of floating by. And that's when it came to me, I've got to get to the bottom of this. And I wrote out my book proposal right there in the stateroom. So when I went home, that was it. I dug in, I started way back in the antiquity, from the beginning of recorded time, and out popped this baby. This is my latest book. It's called The Vegiterranean Diet. And although I call it my newest book, it came out actually published at the end of December, but this is the very first time that I'm talking about it. So I'm really excited to talk about it. My goal of this book was to put nutrition into global and historical context, and to make it understand what is the crux of it. Why does it have all the love in the media, and how do we get this to more plant-based? So I consider myself a student of nutrition. I've always been fascinated by it since I could read. And I've been reading about all of this my whole life. And the whole thing is that there is nothing new about the connection between diet, lifestyle, and health outcomes. We've been studying this since the beginning of recorded history, way back in 400 BC, when Hippocrates declared, "Let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine be thy food." And when Plato, around the same time, said, "For there ought to be no other secondary task to hinder the work of supplying the body with its proper exercise and nourishment." These guys were onto something. And we've been collecting a vast, diverse collection of scientific evidence ever since to put together this information. But what's so interesting about nutrition is that we've collected all this stuff over the years, and right around the late 1940s, like 1948, 50s, 60s, that's when the Mediterranean diet kind of stimulated a lot of this and brought us to where we really are today. It kind of put nutrition into the textbooks and saturated fat and all that. I'm going to talk about that. But health is both a very simple idea about getting out of your body's way, letting it do its thing, because as you heard from Dr. Goldhammer, it knows what to do. We just keep getting in its way. But it's also a complex thing. If you really kind of break it down, the body is way more complex than any of us really give it credit for. I think we're probably the tip of the iceberg with what we know about the complexity, the ingenious that is natural to our being. So people come to me. I'm a registered dietitian. That's my job. People come to me because they have a health risk, or they just got a diagnosis, or they want to lose weight, or they just want to change and get healthier. So I can't just hand them a pile of research and say, "Here you go." I have to help them come up with practical applications. So basically what I do is I take all this information and I put it into things that they can do, things that you can do to reduce your risk for chronic disease, to have a lot of energy, to feel the best that you can and give it all that you have for the healthiest life possible. So I don't want to talk about I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and the science and what I found, but what I really want to focus on is something that I call the Veg 10. And basically the Veg 10 are the 10 tenets to optimal health. And it is my conclusions based on these centuries worth of information that I've gone through. So at first, because all the facts and everything are in the book and online and everything. So first I'm going to define the Mediterranean diet as we know it today. I'll go over the history, and then I'm going to tell you, but I know you could already tell me, what the 3 myths surrounding the Mediterranean diet are, the biggest 3 myths, and we'll hold your thoughts because I know you all know this one. But then I'm going to tell you the 5 reasons, after everything I read, that I believe a Mediterranean diet has the love that it has in the media. And then we're going to get into the goodies, the Veg 10. Okay, so how do you define the Mediterranean diet? There's about 18, I've heard 21, my research kind of showed me different things, countries bordering that Mediterranean basin. So we've got all sorts of different cultures, religions, histories. We have people that are living in Turkey eating a Mediterranean diet, but there's also people living in Egypt eating a Mediterranean diet that looks a little bit different, and people in Italy looking slightly different. And by the way, just so you know, if you haven't read this book, I'm what I call an Italophile, an Italian file. I love all things Italian, which is also a kind of stimulated. So I used a lot of Italian verbiage and just kind of gave it a little Italian flavor, even though the Mediterranean really is defined by all of these other countries as well. So the scientists, of course, in order to study it, had to collect, they had to make a definitive statement, like what is the traditional Mediterranean diet? Like they had to kind of sum up all the different countries and put it into one explanation. So here's what it is traditionally. Abundant plant foods. Vegetables, fruits, cereals, grains, including bread, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Minimally processed, seasonally fresh, locally grown foods, right? We hear about that all the time. Remember that. Now, olive oil, the magic elixir, right? That's the primary source of fat. We'll get into olive oil a lot. Fresh fruit for dessert on typical days. Dairy products in moderate amounts, mostly from cheese and yogurt. 0 to 4 eggs a week. Low consumption of animal products. High monounsaturated to saturated fatty acid ratio. So the monounsaturated from the olive oil, because they had a lot of that, and then the saturated, because the primary source of saturated fat, as most of you know, is from animal products. But we'll talk more about that later. Okay. Oh, and moderate alcohol consumption, preferably from wine, and we'll talk about that too. But just to give you kind of a pretty picture, how many of you have heard of Ancel Keys? He's kind of the father of the Mediterranean diet, if you will. And when he was hearing about all the success in the Mediterranean, and he wanted to kind of figure out what was going on there. Why do they have such lower rates of cardiovascular disease? So him and his wife, Margaret, they went from, I think it was from Switzerland, but I don't know geography very well, over to Italy. And so this was recorded in his book. Oh, and look what was really cool. I hunted this book down. It's like so torn, but this was their book. This was after all the research that they came up with. This beautiful old book. I love this book. And so here's what he said to describe the food in the Mediterranean diet, and it just gives you a nice visual. It was homemade minestrone, pasta in endless variety, served with tomato sauce and a sprinkle of cheese, only occasionally enriched with some bits of meat or served with a little local seafood. A hearty dish of beans and short lengths of macaroni, lots of bread, never more than a few hours from the oven, and never served with any kind of spread. Great quantities of fresh vegetables, a modest portion of meat or fish, perhaps twice a week. A wine of the type we used to call Dago Red, and always fresh fruit for dessert. Doesn't that give you kind of a picture of the essence of what the food was like in probably the 40s and 50s in Italy? All right, so let's go over I'm gonna just give you the highlights. Like I'm gonna do a fast forward warp speed version of the Mediterranean diet history. It all began in Crete. So after World War II, Crete was ravaged, this Greek island. It was completely destroyed by the war, and it was impoverished, they were weak, they were unstable. And so the Rockefeller Center here in the United States collaborated with the Greek government, and they were led by this epidemiologist named Dr. Leland Alba, and they went in there and they did this really massive assessment. Like they were living in their homes, they were measuring how much they bought of food and what they actually ate, and it was just this really, I don't think there's ever been anything done like that or ever since. And all of this information, that was another cool book that I found. I mean, God, I love Amazon. Like you could find anything, it's incredible. So this is like the original document of all that they studied to find out how they could help Crete get better. They looked at 765 households, and here's what they found. Basically, not much has changed. It's just like what they used to eat in ancient Greece. These guys, they didn't have much access to transportation, so they were eating off the land. They were eating what grew in this wonderful climate of the Mediterranean. What their diet looked like when they really calculated it out was 61% of the calories came from whole plant foods, 7% from animal products, which means the rest was from olive oil, because that's a processed plant food. Primarily cereals, vegetables, fruits, and olive oil, pulses, potatoes, and nuts appreciably, especially during the winter, so they were needing extra calories, and they ate very small amounts of animal products. Okay, so fast forward. So around the same time, Dr. Ansel Keys. Now this was an American physiologist. He lived to be 100 years old. He did a lot of really interesting things in the science. He invented K rations. He documented starvation. Like he did this really full assessment of people that actually starved. It was kind of fascinating. I kind of want to read that. It's interesting. I think maybe Dr. Goldhammer has a handle on that. He might have been able to contribute to that. But he is responsible for the Mediterranean diet as we know it today. And he is also responsible with putting together what's called the lipid hypothesis. Have many of you guys heard of the lipid hypothesis? It's the idea of having high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, blood lipids, and the connection to cardiovascular disease. And he connected this back to saturated fat and diet. So he's like one of the first people that were really talking about this way back when. And again, this was hearsay and crazy and all these. It's so wonderful to have people like Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. McDougall here who were visionaries, and they've been put up against people saying, no, that's ridiculous, that's crazy. And then look at who it all ends up being true. So he also was a visionary as well. He was the chairman of the International Society of Cardiology at the time, and he put saturated fat on the map, essentially. So there were several studies that he did leading up to the infamous 7-country study, one of which was called the Minnesota's Business and Professional Men Study. And it was led by Keys and Henry Taylor and their colleagues, and they examined 281 healthy men for about 15 years. They measured their weight, their body fat, their blood pressure, and their cholesterol, and their conclusion was that the only significant predictor of heart disease in the future was a high total cholesterol level. Now before this, genes, it was all the genes. If you had the genes, there's nothing you could do. You're gonna die. If your family had a history of type 2 diabetes or heart disease, that was it. You were out of luck. That was really the thinking around before this time. And by the way, heart disease only started to get that popular around mid-century when we had industrialization, we started eating, and basically all of these chronic diseases took over infectious diseases and other reasons that people were dying. So that was very interesting. But around that time also, he was doing what we kind of refer to as the migrant studies. He was looking at atherosclerosis and coronary heart disease in middle-aged Japanese men living in Japan compared to those living in Hawaii, compared to those living in Los Angeles. So basically the whole idea of your genes not changing on the plane ride over from Japan to America, what happened was they noticed that it was the environment that was causing the problem. It wasn't the genetics. That was like connecting the dots for everyone. At the same time, there were studies like Framingham, that's still going on today, where they were putting all of this stuff together. This was around the same time when Dr. T. Colin Campbell was in China, and he was studying 367 variables in 6,500 adults with very similar genetics, and he found 8,000 statistically significant findings between dietary factors and disease. And this all led to what we all love to say now: genes may load the gun, but diet and lifestyle pull the trigger. So empowering, so important. We do have control over our destiny. And then came the 7-country study that's controversial and very popular, and it is basically what defined the Mediterranean diet. Dr. Key started this in about 1957. It's the first study to methodically evaluate the impact of diet and lifestyle on cardiovascular disease risk in different populations around the world. So he took about 13,000 men, about middle age, like 40 to 49 was considered middle age, and they followed them for about 25, 30 years. And they were broken up into 16 cohorts around Finland, Greece, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, US, and Yugoslavia. Who do you think had, so there were different dietary patterns, obviously. Every culture has their own traditional dietary patterns, but there are also different incidences of cardiovascular disease. Who do you think had the highest incidence of cardiovascular disease? It was Finland and the United States, because they had this very animal product heavy diet. And the lowest was in Japan and Greece. So Japan too has a lot of wonderful research coming out of there too, because they have a low-fat plant-based diet as well. This study was basically what became the compelling evidence to recommend having a saturated fat limit of no more than 10% of calories, which changed to even less recently. So then fast forward to 1999 when the Lyon Diet Heart Study was published. This was the first randomized controlled trial done on the Mediterranean diet, and it was done in Lyon, France, and they were looking at secondary prevention, so people that already had a cardiac event, and they put them on the Mediterranean diet, and they compared that to the standard heart-healthy diet, and they found that the Mediterranean diet group had 50 to 70% lower risk of recurrent heart disease, of a second event, as did the people following the Mediterranean diet. And then a second study, this was the Predimed study, where stuff is still coming out of this cohort a lot. This was done on primary prevention. So these are people that had risk factors for cardiovascular disease but did not yet have an event. They broke this up. This is kind of mind-boggling for all of us who've listened to this stuff about the no oil. Listen to this. They broke them up into 3 arms for about 4.8 years. One group was on the Mediterranean diet with, and close your ears, 1 liter of extra virgin olive oil a week. A liter of olive oil a week. That's a lot of oil. We'll talk about that. Compared to the Mediterranean diet with 30 to 60 grams of nuts per day, compared to the control group who were told to reduce fat, but guess what? They didn't, and their fat was still 36, 37%. It was still really way up high. Nonetheless, somehow, there was a 30% relative risk reduction for cardiac events in the Mediterranean diet compared to the control. And the research keeps coming out. I watch this, I've got a Google alert on Mediterranean diet since I started researching this, and there is stuff coming out every single day. So recently, some headlines of some studies were that there was a decreased risk of overall mortality in major chronic disease, fewer cardiovascular and cancer-related deaths, decreased risk for stroke and depression, improved physical and cognitive function and lower risk of Alzheimer's, reduced prevalence of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes and likely peripheral artery disease, better quality of life with aging. All right, let's talk about that. What do you think, and these pictures give it away, what would you guys guess, what are the 3 top myths about why the Mediterranean diet is amazing? Olive oil, wine, and the fish, right? Does anyone ever hear any other ones? Those are the big ones. Those are the ones that everyone's like, oh, olive oil must be amazing. I'm gonna pour it all over my burger and it's gonna make everything really good. I'm gonna be really healthy. I'm gonna have a glass of wine when I go to McDonald's and it's gonna be much better. It's gonna quell the effects of all the anti-inflammatory products that I'm consuming. And the fish has to be better because the fish is better than the red meat. So these are the biggest myths. But if you really look at the context, because that's reductionism at its finest. It's saying, oh, they ate olive oil, that must be why they're so healthy. So I'm gonna make sure, I'm gonna eat olive oil on everything. It's kind of like it's a misinterpretation of the information. Here are the 5 reasons that I believe and what it looks like that the Mediterranean diet does work. To the extent that it does. Because if you look at those studies, it doesn't even come close to what we see in the plant-based world. It doesn't even come close. Number 1, and this was my hypothesis going in, of course it was, has to be a plant-based diet. That's why they're having the benefit. We know that because of their overall lifestyle, which is another one, that's the 3rd one, and their overall lifestyle. So they were eating food that they were growing off the land, they were cooking their food, they move, they exercise, they walk 5 to 10 miles a day, they sit down as a family to dinner. Maybe that glass of wine helped because it was part of that, of sitting down and relaxing and having a stress reduction and like all of the lifestyle that goes along with the traditional Mediterranean diet. That is where that benefit comes in. But also the synergy, if you think about what they were eating, and we'll talk a lot about synergy in my pick proper packaging tenet, it's what you're getting when you're eating those beautiful foods. Dr. Van Dijken had the beautiful explanation about all the stuff that is involved with just each food. It's so beautiful. It's not like anything that we can create in a lab. Less is more, and I'm going to talk a lot about this too. They were eating fewer calories in the traditional Mediterranean diet. They were leaner. They didn't have the problems. Like right now, we've got 70% of America overweight or obese, 69%, half obese, half overweight, and we are continuously expanding, as Dr. Goldhammer showed with those visuals. So less is more. Simple. And of course, delicioso cucina. Like I said, I love the Italian. I can't do it, but I love it. The food is delicious. You know, if you're eating a healthy diet, you guys were eating all weekend here, the food is delicious. When you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, people don't realize how delicious it is. You know, we've gotten so used to seeing our plate with the big hunk of meat and the, you know, oily vegetables. My mom couldn't make vegetables growing up, and I hated Brussels sprouts. Now it's like my favorite food because now we see that we rethink the plate or the bowl. Like we completely rethink how we eat, and it tastes delicious. And if it tastes delicious, you're going to continue on that, and that's why we have such good people stick with it. People stay with it for long periods of time. So here's a Mediterranean diet pyramid. This is the old ways, the most recent one. Take a look at that. So I think that right there in the middle, oops, that was the one I wasn't supposed to push. Right there, like this is their base. That should be the whole thing. That's the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains, the legumes. Well, they also have the olives, the olive oil, but the herbs and the spices were right there at the bottom, at the base of the pyramid, along with, which is very important too, exercise, being with family, social. If you look at the blue zones, there's a lot of social interaction, religious, you know, there's a lot of that family orientation that really helps also with stress management and support for a healthy diet. So I changed it. This is my Vegiterranean food pyramid. Now, I took out the animal products and the olive oil for health reasons, of course. I mean, I'm a dietitian, I focus on that. But for the first time in my career, I talked about other issues in my book, but I brought in the experts to do the talking. And I interviewed 3 of my heroes. I interviewed Dr. Richard Oppenlander. Have any of you heard about him? Amazing man who's basically, he has great information in his books like Food Choice and Sustainability, and he talks about the environmental implications of what we eat. We are no longer in a state where we can eat whatever we want. We have run out. Time has run out with that. And I sit here, I live in California, I'm paying 99 cents a lemon. This drought is killing us. This drought, we are seeing the results of what is happening with our food supply. So we have other reasons to consider taking out the animal products altogether. There's also, in my book, I interviewed Dr. Melanie Joy. Have you guys heard of her? She wrote Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and We're Cows. Wonderful psychologist. And she talks about carnism. So my 3rd chapter in the book is called The 3 C's of How We Eat. I don't know if any of you are writers, but like this was the only time in my entire life of writing where I actually had that experience that they talk about flow, when stuff just pours out, you're just typing and it's just coming out, and I was crying. It was like, so this chapter is very personal for me, and it was very raw because I talked about, you know, my reasons for being vegan and plant-based and all that. But Melanie Joy shared that whole concept of carnism. If you don't know her work, I highly recommend it. She basically talks about, you know, when someone says I'm vegan and they say, oh no, I'm not vegan, I'm an omnivore, like that's the counter. They're doing like a biological opposition, like the antagonist would be a biological thing. So a vegan is more of a philosophical thing. So the antagonist to the philosophical thing is carnism. It's a belief system, and obviously Dr. Joy explains this much better than I am, but she talks about it's the the belief system that eating meat is natural, normal, and necessary. And that's why there's so much resistance in our culture to make these changes. So she talks about that wonderfully in the book. And then I had Jean Bauer talk about compassion and how the horrific suffering of animals that goes into animal consumption, the way we're eating them now, the whole factory farming system is horrific. So my point is that there's a lot of reasons to take the animal products out of our diet, and of course of which we will talk with food. So let me just break down my pyramid. So I put fruits and vegetables on the bottom because everyone agrees, I'll show you a picture later, everyone agrees half your plate should be fruits and vegetables, everyone. The American Institute of Cancer Research, the USDA, their pyramid, their plate has half their plate fruits and vegetables. So no one's gonna argue with that. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Whole grains comes next, legumes, leafy green vegetables gets their own special category because they are that special. We'll talk about why. And then I put in here to get your fats, because we do need a little bit of fat, but get them from whole food sources. A little bit of avocado, have the olives instead of the olive oil, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then wine I put at the top because it's not mandatory. The wine isn't the reason people did well. It's because, like I said, maybe the lifestyle, maybe there's some resveratrol in there, but you could also get it from the grapes. You could also get all of those phytochemicals from our food, which is a wonderful way to get it. So it's an optional thing. And of course, you could look at it as a plate as well. And exercise plays in. We're going to talk about exercise as well. All right, let's get into the Veg 10. Let's put it into practice. I like this quote. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It is not merely the absence of disease. Here are the Veg 10. Pick proper packaging, stay simpler, revel in the rainbow, focus on fiber, leverage legumes and leafy greens, favoritize fats, sweeten selectively, practice cautious calorie consciousness, magnify movement, and master mindfulness. So let's start with pick proper packaging. The best way to define this is in the chart that you're probably going to recognize from Dr. Campbell's The China Study. He let me reprint this in my book because I thought this was brilliant. What he did was he took 500 calories, equal parts of tomatoes, spinach, lima beans, peas, and potatoes, and he compared it to 500 calories, equal parts beef, pork, chicken, and whole milk. And he put them into the nutritional database where it just kind of comes out with the numbers, and here's what he found. And I think this sums it all up because there's a nice equal balance of different types of plant and animal foods. Okay, there's 0 dietary cholesterol in plants. You only find cholesterol in animals, but there's, of course, the cholesterol in the animal products. 9 times the amount of fat in the same amount of calories, 9 times the amount of fat. Same protein for all those people that are worried about the protein, but look at how you're packaging this protein, same amount of protein, but look at all the beta carotene, thousands of times, and beta carotene is a potent antioxidant. 31 grams of fiber. Now, I argue, and I'm convinced that the 2 most important nutrient groups in the world are fiber and phytochemicals. They have the most dramatic impacts on our long-term health. Where do you find that? Exclusively in plants. There's vitamin C, you get 10 times the amount of iron. Everyone's so worried about their iron, twice as much calcium. You basically can get everything you need from a whole food plant-based diet. And the thing that drives me crazy is that when people go, oh, well, carbs are bad, and I get this all the time, carbs are bad, or I'm not gonna get enough protein. Like, carbs are not a food group. Carbs are a macronutrient along with fat and protein, and all whole intact foods have some combination of these different macronutrients. So we really eat food, we don't eat nutrients. We really need to kind of look at the bigger picture. If any of you haven't read Dr. Campbell's Whole, I highly recommend that as well. It was incredible, the way he explains how complex the system is. It's not just this one nutrient. There are thousands and thousands of nutrients we have yet to identify. It's much more complicated than that. Number 2, stay simpler. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. In Crete in the 1950s, a typical snack would be tea with maybe some bread, maybe or some fruit. Look at what my kids are exposed to. I'm a mom. These are what my kids have their friends like bringing to them all the time. These horrible goldfish and all those other products that are out there. Look at, you can't even recognize the ingredients in there. That's a typical snack for a kid these days, tragically. Can any of you identify this? This is this cool new book that I think it just came out. It's called Ingredients, a visual exploration of 75 additives and food products. So those are all the ingredients to make up. I mean, I've never seen that color in nature, have you? Maybe it lives somewhere deep within the clay pit somewhere. But really, these are Doritos Cool Ranch tortilla chips. I can't even say it. Doritos Cool Ranch. Those are the ingredients. That's going to be kind of a fun book to use. How do we stay simpler? Simple. First, detoxify from those hyperpalatable foods. It's funny because a lot of people have come to me. I've kind of become subspecialized in my practice of working with people with sugar addiction. And I saw Dr. Goldhammer's talk also a couple weeks ago at Plantrition Conference, and he said that it takes 3 weeks to neuroadapt off of sodium, like to neuroadapt to get used to and accommodate a lower sodium diet. Have any of you ever gone from a regular sodium diet to a low sodium diet? Or from a high-fat milk to a skim milk? Like anyone ever kind of wean themselves off of artificial sweeteners? So he also said it takes 3 months, he just said it too, to neuroadapt to a low-fat diet. But when I asked him, well, what about sugar? How fast does it take for us to adapt to sugar? He said, well, you don't, because we naturally are biologically designed to seek out sugar because we need carbohydrates for our brain and our body to function. So I thought that was really interesting. So what I do with my clients, and I found to be really quite effective, I wait until they're ready. I will not work with anyone unless they're ready, because otherwise it's just me banging my head against the wall, is if someone really wants to get off of sugars, I just have them take it out. I tell them to commit, give me 3 weeks, and you just take them all out. Just rip off the Band-Aid really quickly. But I also have them do loving things for themselves, like make it an easy week. You don't have anything stressful going on. Like love yourself. Make yourself some delicious desserts. Like Chef AJ has in her book those wonderful, really kind of rich desserts made out of date paste and stuff. Those are great ways to wean yourself off of the sugars, but no refined sugars, and I'll tell you exactly what those look like. But when you get those things out of your body, you stop craving them. You stop, and I see this all the time. It happened to me. I used to be the biggest chocolate chip cookie junkie. Ask anyone. Like, I couldn't even finish baking them before I was done eating the dough. I love them. I don't even want them anymore. Even if they're whole food, vegan, I have no interest whatsoever in them. And I didn't even try to do that. It just happened. And I've seen this with probably hundreds of people now over the years. So you detox from them, you retrain your taste buds. It takes about 3 weeks to completely get a new set of taste buds, essentially the way your body regenerates. Cooking, it's kind of a lost art. I'm a busy working mom, I live in the city. It's challenging to always get a really healthy dinner on the table, especially with 2 kids, it's just busy. So, a lot of us have kind of lost that. And I think it doesn't have to be as complex. I love what Dr. McDougall was saying, just, whip up some beans and some frozen rice and pick some kale up and just throw it on a plate. And it can be that simple. And there's some great places like Ruby Cooking School. They now teach a plant-based course online where you can learn how to cook. And you know what, it's really relaxing and it's really empowering to be able to get in the kitchen and make some delicious meals. But it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just focus on eating as close to nature as possible. And I love this Chinese proverb. The more you eat, the less flavor. The less you eat, the more flavor. All of a sudden the yam tastes like sugar, right? An apple is like candy. It's amazing what can happen to your taste buds. Okay, the third tenet, revel in the rainbow. Your mom was right. Eat your fruits and vegetables. It's about, 1.7 million or 2.8% of all deaths worldwide can be attributed to low fruit and vegetable consumption. It's one of the World Health Organization calls it one of the top 10 risk factors that contribute to mortality is not eating fruits and vegetables. A quarter of the population, less than a quarter, gets the minimum 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And when they tallied that, they included French fries and ketchup. The USDA considers pizza a vegetable. It's really scary if you think about it. So the people that are eating and the research shows that you really need about 7 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. So we really got to work on getting more fruits and vegetables into the diet. They are the most nutrient-dense foods, and they're rich of all sorts of vitamins, minerals, fibers, and phytochemicals. So we need to eat more of those. So I put this little meme together. I'm not very good at memes, but I'm learning how. And it's true that every single person agrees, even the USDA, fruits and vegetables, the American Cancer Plate. Everyone agrees that fruits and vegetables need to be half your plate. Look at all the beautiful phytochemicals that get involved. All sorts of things happen. I always tell people this, eat the rainbow every day. Challenge yourself to a double rainbow if you dare. But it's really easy to do so because every color represents a whole wide spectrum of different phytonutrients that have amazing powers. Like Dr. Weiss was explaining yesterday, like what those plants need, those chemicals that they emit for themselves to get really, healthy and protect themselves from pests and from the environment. They do the same things in our body. So some phytochemicals are antioxidants, some are anti-inflammatory, some are antifungal, some are antibacterial. They have wonderful, powerful effects in the body, and you could only get them from plants. Focus on fiber. Have any of you seen this? I love vegan street memes. I think they're all brilliant. But they said, all of these animal products are great sources of fiber. None. There are none. But when I used to have all these gastrointestinal problems when I ate typical diet when I was for 20 years as a kid, My parents would take me to the emergency room and the gastroenterologist and the internal medicine, the family, and they would give me all of these things. Oh, here, take this powder, this potion, this pill. Not one of them, not one asked me, what do you eat? And I had to figure that out myself. I just think that's horrific. So why do we need fiber? Why is it one of the 2 top health-promoting nutrients in the food system? The most famous one is it decreases transit time. It helps everything get out of your body, which is good because then there's less time for any kind of toxins in the body to go into your bloodstream, to get in from the intestinal tract. So it minimizes your exposure to toxins. It removes heavy metals, such as mercury. It removes excess sex hormones, which is good. Get rid of those out of the body. It slows the absorption of glucose, which is really important. You want to moderate how your body absorbs the glucose, and you want to control how the insulin works. It controls the rate of digestion, and it increases satiety. Fiber plus water equals bulk. So it tells the signals inside your stomach tell your brain when you're done eating, and you need fiber for that to happen. And because of that, it helps increase weight loss because you're eating more food, less calories, fewer calories. And it decreases your risk for colorectal cancer because you're removing those toxins from your system faster. So how do you focus on fiber? Again, make half your plate fruits and vegetables. That's where you get a lot of fiber from. And there's all sorts of different fibers nowadays. There's not just soluble and insoluble. Now there's fermentable, and there's all these different kinds they act in different ways inside the body to help you get healthier. So I recommend about 1 to 1.5 cups of legumes a day. I'll tell you about that later. They have all sorts of wonderful different fibers in them as well. Include the peel when you can, and I suggest doing that when you have organic, when you could choose organic, otherwise you have to scrub it, make sure you get all the pesticides off. But sometimes it's nice to include the peel because that's where a lot of the nutrition and the fiber lies. Also, if you're eating fats, that's another reason to not use the oil and to use the intact fats like nuts and avocados for your small sources of fat that you need. But those also contain lots of fiber. And always opt for the wholest grain. So the brown rice over the white rice, the sprouted grain bread over the white bread or the wheat bread. It always kind of goes in order. Or the couscous, go to the original grain. Tenet number 5 is leverage legumes and leafy greens. Lovely legumes, which you probably all know, beans, lentils, peas, soy products. Peanuts are technically a legume, but they're not nutritionally very similar. They're higher in fat, so we don't tend to lump them together, and I don't lump them together. I just wanted to throw it out there that it is technically a legume. But they also have their wonderful for sources of fiber. They also are a wonderful source for lysine, which is one amino acid that it's a great place to find it. It's harder to find in the rest of the plant kingdom. One more reason just to enjoy your legumes. You're still gonna get plenty of protein, that's not what I'm saying. But legumes also carry along with it some wonderful minerals like calcium and iron and zinc and selenium. So like I said, I recommend about 1 to 1.5 cups a day. That's about 3 servings a day. A serving is about 1/2 cup. Let thy greens be thy medicine, and thy medicine be thy greens. Hippocrates got it a little bit off. He forgot about that part. The most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. They're filled with all sorts of wonderful nutrients. They've got those fabulous phytochemicals, rich in, really good for your eyes and for everything, for your endothelium cells and all that. It promotes detoxification, promotes healing. Now, it's good to have both raw and cooked. When you eat the raw leafy greens, the glucosinolates are converted into isothiocyanates via an enzyme called myrosinase, and that is a powerful cancer fighter as well. So when you cook it, you lose that enzyme. However, when it's cooked, the carotenoids are better absorbed. So it's good to have both raw and cooked. So I recommend having about 3 servings a day. Now, 1 serving is either 1 cup cooked or half a cup cooked or 1 cup raw because it shrinks down so much. Now, how many of you have heard or concerned about oxalates? Become this cycle. I get this question a lot. I'm not concerned about them, but because some people are, I recommend kind of opting or just kind of like preferentiating the low oxalate leafy greens, such as lettuces, all lettuces, and bok choy, and broccoli, and Brussels sprouts, and cabbage, and watercress. All of these foods are really low oxalate greens, and those are just ones to preferentiate. And I say that because a lot of my clients that have never eaten leafy greens, and they start, trying to incorporate them, and they're like, yes, I'm eating spinach every day, and I'm getting my greens. It's spinach, spinach, spinach. I look at their food journal. You might want to just kind of like have some variety there and just change it up a little bit. So that's why I mention it. Okay, now here's where we're gonna get down and dirty with the whole fat thing. So there's a lot of different talks. We could do a whole talk on fat. It's kind of exciting to talk about fat. So first I'm gonna talk about just the types of fat, and then I'm gonna talk about the essential fats, because there are only two that are essential technically. And then I'm gonna talk about the whole versus the oil, the process, and then what is the ideal quantity that we're supposed to consume. All right, so first let's start with the bad boys. Saturated fat, that's what's been made so popular by the Mediterranean diet. We know, and it's well established, that saturated fats promote cardiovascular disease. The primary source of saturated fat come from animal foods, right? Unless you're eating a lot of tropical oils, all the whole coconut oil rage, high in saturated fat. So the American Heart Association, because of those meta-analyses that came out recently saying, oh, saturated fat is fine and butter is back, and the headlines on Time magazine, I'm sure all of you heard about that hubbub. Well, because of all of that, the American Heart Association did really extensive reviews of the current data and decades worth, and they lowered their recommendation. So now you're only supposed to take in no more than 5 to 6% of your calories from saturated fat. That's down from the 10% that used to be recommended, and then it was 7%. 5 to 6%. Guess what vegans get? 5 to 6%, unless they're eating a lot of any coconut oil. And then there's polyunsaturated fats. These are the only fats that we really are essential to our diet. We need to get them from our diet so we can do other things in the body, and those are the omega-3s and the omega-6s. And then there's the monounsaturated fats that's so fancy in the Mediterranean diet because that's what you find primarily in the olive oil. However, it has either a neutral or slightly beneficial effect on cholesterol. It's not an essential fat. The two essential fat categories, the polyunsaturated, you've got the omega-6, the linoleic acid, and you've got the omega-3 fatty acids, which get elongates in the bloodstream to eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, and then docosahexaenoic acid, DHA. So this happens naturally when if you consume the ALA, or people that are eating fish are getting this elongated version directly. But if you take it in from ALA, you can get it from foods like flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, leafy greens have it, soybeans and soy foods and walnuts. Those are good sources of omega-3, same with wheat germ. The omega-6 is kind of ubiquitous in the plant-based world. Like you will want to make sure, think about these foods, just put those on your head, try to make sure you get some of those every day. You can get plenty of it with not a lot. Other omega-6 that you found in all the plant oils, which we'll talk about in a second, it's pretty much in all plant foods, any plant foods that have fat. So here's the interesting thing, is that we don't have enough long-term data on vegans, long-term vegans, that lifelong vegans. And what we do know is that vegans tend to have lower levels of the long chain, the EPA and the DHA in our blood, because we're not taking in a direct source. We're taking it from ALA and then we convert it down when we need it. So the question is, well, do we need to have more? Probably not, because we have lower risks of cardiovascular disease, we have lower risk of Alzheimer's. There's all these reasons that it doesn't make any sense why we would need that. But we don't have the information. So a lot of us are now starting to recommend kind of optimizing your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So you guys know Brenda Davis? Yeah, she's a mentor of mine, and she started doing this, and she's kind of really plowed through the omega-3, omega-6 data. And so what she recommends, and so what I started recommending too, is to double the RDA for ALA. So just make sure you're getting enough of the ALA so that your body has enough to convert down. So that would be 3.2 grams a day for men and 2.2 for women. The other thing to do is you could reduce your omega-6 fat. What's the best and easiest way to reduce your omega-6 fat intake? Cut out oils. One of the best ways, just yet another reason to cut out oils. And also, if you're concerned, like I do for my pregnant clients and my breastfeeding clients, sometimes I'll recommend to take a microalgae source of DHA and EPA. We're not sure if we need to, we're not sure. I don't like recommending supplements, but some people are doing that now. So Protagoras, back to ancient Greece, he said about oil, I thought this was so cool that I found this. He said, all doctors forbid the sick to take oil except the smallest quantity if one is going to eat, because olive oil is good for the outward parts of man's body for anointing the skin, but at the same time as bad as can be for the inward. So it's not new thinking. I love coconut oil in my hair. It makes it soft, but I wouldn't put it in my body. So they were thinking about this since back in ancient days. All right, so we all know why we should eliminate oil and why olive oil. Well, I'll tell you the conclusion later, but here's the difference. First of all, the number one reason I really believe in this is, like I said, almost 70% of our country is overweight or obese. And in the world, 1 in 3 are overweight or obese now. Most people aren't trying to get more calories. In Crete, in Greece, in the 40s and 50s, people needed more calories. They were trying to survive in Crete. So they were eating the olive oil because they had a concentrated source of calories. Oil is the most concentrated source of calories you could possibly find in the world, in the food world. That is 4,000 calories a pound. It's 2,000 calories a cup. And think about how the way people generously all over their salad. It's easy to get half a cup on on a salad, or if you're sauteing, it's easy to add up, and that's thousands of calories. So most people are coming to me because they want to lose weight, so that's the easiest thing. In fact, if people have been, I've been eating whole food plant-based, I'm doing really well, I can't lose weight. I'm like, have you cut out the oil? No, it's just a little here and a little there. Try it, and that's when the magic kicks in. Also, like I said, it helps optimize the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. Now, ultimately, we're supposed to aim for about 1 to 2, 1 to 4 omega-3 to omega-6s. Not that I want you to do any math or think about this, just to know. But we're technically getting, in the standard American diet, we're getting about 1 to 14 to 1 to 20 ratio. So we really just need to rein in. That's from all the processed foods and from all the oils that people are consuming. Rancidity is another reason to avoid oils. You wouldn't know if your oil went rancid. You can't smell or taste it necessarily. And that's just another source of free radicals that you're putting into your bloodstream. So another reason to avoid it. And it's technically a processed food. I'll show you the picture of comparing olives to olive oil in the next slide. But also, here's a couple bonuses. You know when you're cooking with all the oil in your pan, and like when my mother-in-law comes, I love her, and we did our recipes together, but I made her take the olive oil out of everything because she used to use the olive oil really, lovingly. And when I would clean the dishes after she would cook for my kids, it was so hard to clean the pans. They're so greasy, and I love not having to do that when I cook. And also, you don't get any stains. Those splatters, it stains your clothes. Just another bonus. So here's what, I kind of broke it down because if you think about olives versus olive oil. Okay, 1 cup of olives has 155 calories. 1 cup of olive oil, more than 2,000 calories. 4 grams of fiber, very healthy, we want fiber. 0 in the oil. 14 versus 224. I mean, that's dramatic. That's more than a day's worth that anyone should be consuming, and that's just a cup. That's not a lot. The flax seeds, 36 calories versus 120 calories in the oil. 2 grams of fiber, 0. You take all the fiber out. 3 grams of fat versus 14. So there's a lot of reasons to pick the whole over the intact over the oils. So here's the kicker. So the question is, how much fat should we be consuming in our diet, the total fat? And again, okay, I'm one of those dietitians, I don't like to count. I don't want anyone counting calories or fat percentages. I just want you to eat food and not have to think about it, which was such a relief when I got out of grad school, because when I was in the hospitals and they were telling me I had to count carbs for the diabetics and I had to count fat for the heart patients, it was crazy making, and it didn't help because people were so frustrated that they just said forget it and went and ate their fast food and went on with their way. But here's what's interesting. We've seen these amazing, dramatic, extraordinary, life-changing results on a low-fat vegan diet, on a 10% calorie plant-based diet with Dr. Esselstyn's work, Dr. Ornish's work, and Dr. Barnard's work. They were all on a 10% calories from fat diet, a very low-fat, plant-based diet. In the traditional Asian diets, they consume about 10 to 15% of their calories from fat, and mostly plant-based. If you look at Okinawa in the blue zones, if you look at the China study, that's how much fat they were consuming. But on the other side, the Mediterranean diet was upwards of 35–40% of their calories from fat. That's not moderate, that's a pretty high fat intake. They tended to do okay. They did not do as well as what we see in the whole food plant-based diet. But then we also have some raw vegans that haven't been studied extensively, but they also eat a moderate amount of fat. Many health organizations, like the World Health Organization, Institute of Medicine, American Heart Association, their recommendations are really broad. I think they recognize all these different dietary patterns, and they recommend between 15 to 30% of calories from fat, no more than 35% as the maximum. The traditional vegan diet without, lots of oils and stuff, about 30% of calories from fat. And the standard American diet, of course, is about 36%. So it would be really cool to have a study with a 10% whole food plant-based diet, 10% fat, versus a plant-based diet with a 20% fat. It'd be so nice to control that. We need so much more research. So, the question is, possibly some of the American Heart Association recommends 5 to 6% or less than that for saturated fat. So basically, the conclusions are, saturated fat is still harmful. The Mediterranean diet is likely healthy in spite of, not because of, the olive oil. And to opt for whole over the oil, especially when you're trying to lose weight or lower your cholesterol, which is the majority of the population. But the question about how much, maybe it's just where you're getting your sources of fat from that matters perhaps more than exactly how much. I like this one. Show off. Okay, tenet number 7 is sweeten selectively. The World Health Organization recommends no more than 10% of calories are coming from sugar, about 12.5 teaspoons max. They're trying to get it down to 5%, but there's so much resistance because people don't want to get rid of their sugars. But the average American is consuming twice as much. They're consuming 20% of calories and 23 teaspoons of sugar. So we're eating way more than we're supposed to. Well, why is that bad? It's a processed food, just like oil. What oil is to a whole fat, sugar is to a whole carbohydrate. And there are all sorts of links to chronic diseases aimed at sugar. And of course, the soda industry, there's this new book by Mary Nestle called Soda Politics. The soda industry, the food industry really gets in the way here as much as they do with the idea of, have you guys followed the dietary guidelines saga this year? Oh, I read that 500-page document about like what the dietary guideline, the advisory committee recommended, and all they said was we need to eat less meat, less red meat, and they also had a little paragraph to consider sustainability. But the meat industry went ballistic because we all know that. We all know we need to be eating less meat, and nobody can argue with that. But the meat industry went crazy, and there's it's been fascinating, and they're putting out all their guns and to see everything they can do in their powers to avoid those words, those simple words that we all know, from getting into the ultimate dietary guidelines. I mean, it's shocking. It's shocking to see it. I mean, I've never really watched it this closely. Okay, so to avoid sugar, you avoid all kinds of refined sugars. If it's brown sugar, if it's organic sugar, if it's turbinado sugar, whatever that, like all maple sugar, they're all still sugar, and they all have the same effect in your body. So you could recognize this on a label with an "-ose" in the suffix: dextrose, sucrose, maltose, galactose. In agave and high fructose syrup and cane syrup, same kind of thing in different packaging. And I also recommend avoiding artificial sweeteners. And I include stevia in that because all of these are non-caloric sweeteners, and there's a lot of reasons I recommend avoiding them. Like, we don't really know what's happening to the brain when you give it something that tastes like sugar and hundreds to thousands of times sweeter than sugar, and then you don't feed it sugar. Like, your body's expecting food and calories, and you're not getting it. But we've seen like people that tend to consume more artificial sweeteners tend to gain weight or be more overweight. So there really is no benefit. The number one reason I recommend taking these out of your diet, first of all, they're processed and they're chemicals, but also because they are hundreds to thousands of times sweeter than table sugar. So anyone that's trying to get off of sweeteners, that's just going to keeps that palate heightened, that heightened sense of sweetness, and you'll never get off of sugars if you're expecting that level of sweetness. Better options, of course, fruit. Just like they did in Crete, like they did in ancient Greece, they used fresh fruit. You can now use frozen fruit. We have access to that. You could bake, cook, make dressings, blends. You could do anything with fruit purees. You could use date paste, date syrup, pure maple syrup, just original sweeteners. And you'll notice that you'll stop craving anything sweet, and fruit will be more than enough for you. And I like this, like the reverse, where the rats are looking in on the people, and they're pressing the button for the sugar. They want more sugar, they want more sugar. And Dr. Goldhammer explained that mechanism. They appear to be intelligent, but display an irresistible attraction to sugar. Okay, so I kind of coined this thing. It's kind of fun to say, it's kind of hard to say. Cautious calorie consciousness. And this is based on the principle that they talk about in the Blue Zones about Okinawa. In the Okinawan diet, they all talk about something called hara hachibu. Have you guys heard of hara hachibu? It literally translates into, eat until you're 80% full. So eating just enough, which sounds very obvious, but food is a very complex, deep-seated emotional thing for all of us. We're raised a certain way. We relate to our family a certain way, our religion, our traditions. Like, food is very deeply intermeshed with every part of our life. We make 200 food choices a day. 200 food choices a day. Think about how prevalent that is in our life. So telling someone to take something away or telling someone that they can't eat a certain food it's a big deal. It's psychologically a big deal, socially a big deal. It's a big thing for people. So what I try to encourage my clients, and what I'm trying to implement, what I talked about in this book, is getting more to an intuitive way of eating. And any of you that have eaten this way and eaten a whole food plant-based diet knows how amazing you feel when you eat this way. And there's something intuitive about taking care of your body and treating it and feeding it what we were born to eat, what nature made for us to eat. So I have all these people. I was a personal trainer. I still am technically a personal trainer for like 20 years now. And I overhear all these trainers at the gym. Oh, you need to have 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. You need to eat every 2 hours. You need to have 5 meals. Like, everyone's got a rule. And people are like, oh, but my trainer said I could only have, and everyone's like, you kind of have to live by these exogenous rules. But we need to ignore all of that, because guess who knows how much you need to eat and when you need to eat? Only you do. Only your own body knows. So it's time to kind of lose all those exogenous sources and try to get back into your own bodies and feel what it means and when you're hungry and listening to all of those signals. Your body knows when it needs to eat, it knows how much it needs to eat, and it knows what's going to help you feel the best. And if any of you haven't read The Pleasure Trap, I highly recommend that book as well. It basically explains why we're designed to avoid pain, like hunger, and seek pleasure, like eating, while conserving energy. So that's why, for some people, the very calorie-loaded foods, the very hyper-palatable foods are so tempting because it's like a calorie bomb that you can get in a very efficient way. So you're biologically programmed out of that. So if we get rid of all of those foods and we're eating closer to what our bodies really want to eat, we're going to be better. So the rules of honing in, isn't that the cutest frog ever? I wonder if that's for real. So you eat only when you're truly hungry. And that sounds so obvious. But when you're working with food addiction, you're working with a lot of people that are used to eating these hyper-palatable foods, it doesn't always work this way. Or if someone's used to eating every 2 hours, they lose that sensation. So what I have my clients do, and it sounds a little hokey, but when you're about to eat, close your eyes. Are you really hungry? And if you're not really, truly, physically hungry, don't eat. If you're thinking, well, what am I? Okay, maybe I'm stressed. So I have people write a list. What do you do when you're stressed? Go take a hot bath. Go call my best friend. Go, pet my doggy. Whenever I lick my dog, he makes everything better. Like that kind of thing. Like just to have a list of things that you could do instead of eat, because you don't want to eat for non-physical, for hunger reasons. And of course, oops, I keep pushing that button. When someone tells you not to do something, that's when you want to do it. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. Eat whole plant foods, because that's not going to stimulate any of this brain chemistry. The dopamine responses is not going to stimulate you to eat more of the unhealthy foods. And stop when you feel good. The hara hachi bu, cautious calorie consciousness. You never have to count calories again if you really hone in. And so what also happens is, how many of you eat in front of the computer or the TV? Come on. Never? Come on. Most of us do. We get sucked in. Like life gets crazy. We're busy. Like stuff is happening. Or your phone. I know you're watching your phone. You've got your phone right next to you and you're eating. A lot of people do that. So you're not really paying attention to what you're eating. You're not really like feeling the food go down your body. And it's kind of like it's a cool experience. And you'll tend to eat less and you'll tend to eat better because you have this relationship with what you're eating. So I use a hunger satiety scale. Like the number 1 would be like at day 1 at Dr. Goldhammer's at True North, and number 10 would be like Thanksgiving stuffed. So you really want to kind of eat when you're hungry at 2, 3, and eat up until 7, 8, and just try to think about, well, what number am I? And I have people that are really trying to hone in on this, keep their numbers when they start to eat and when they finish eating on their journals to help them kind of get in touch with this. Other ways to hone in. Create rituals. Light a candle. Some people say a prayer before they eat. We started this whole thing, with the family when my kids were old enough. Now I've been very adamant about this. My husband comes home. We shut the TV. The homework goes away. We sit down. How was your day? My daughter has her favorite game. Guess the word. What starts with a C and ends with an R. And it's in this room. Like we always have this game. So we've created rituals, and we all sit down. And we kind of really I love our dinners. It's become a really special thing, and I really enjoy my food. That's my favorite meal of the day because I'm sitting together with my family. Shutting off all those distractions. You don't realize how much they impact you. And how many times have you sat there with the bag of popcorn and all of a sudden it's gone? Have you guys read Dr. Brian Wansing's work, Mindless Eating? Really good book. I highly recommend that one too. I have a list for you of books to read. Lots of homework in case you haven't hit it. But he talks about, there are enormous amount of calories that go into your body and people don't realize it because you're so distracted. You don't even realize. Like people did he did a disappearing soup study where he had like a little straw underneath and the soup was kind of disappearing and people were talking, didn't realize. They ate I don't know how much, like a liter extra of soup than they would have with the distractions. So that's a really interesting book because we don't even acknowledge what's happening while we're eating. Spending time. So what they say to get kids to eat their vegetables, and I'm working on this. This is my biggest challenge of my life ever as a mom, is you go to the farm. Like I'll take the kids to the farmer's market, even the farmer's market. For us in LA, farmer's market's like the farm, okay? Sorry, but that's just Los Angeles. So we'll go and they'll be like, oh, Mom, what's that? And they'll pick it out, and then I'll take them home, and then if they help me prepare it, they're invested in it. They care about it, so then they're more likely to eat it. Well, so are we. If we go and we pick out something that looks really interesting, what if you sit down and you kind of look at it? Well, have you really ever checked out your apple? Have you ever really examined the beauties? What is it, more green or more red? Have you ever looked at the intricacies of what you're eating? And then taken a bite and felt your teeth on the apple and the crunch and listened to it and really kind of fully involved yourself in a meal? How often do you really do that? I don't. I'm working on it because I think it's really important. But it connects you to your food. It connects you into being more mindful. Number 9, magnify movement. Okay, food is number 1. Food is the most important thing you can do for your health, period. But you also have to be mindful about moving, because moving, as we've become a very sedentary society, 25% of the US population completely sedentary. 50% of United States population gets not enough activity, not even formal exercise, just a little bit of activity. So we really need to be more active. We were made to move. Our bodies want to move. Part of the Mediterranean diet culture, they moved. They were hustling. They were working. They were moving throughout the day. I usually wear my mom got me a step counter for Mother's Day, and it's like my favorite thing. I'm kind of obsessed with it because I have to get to the 10,000, and if I don't, I'll be doing laps in front of, whatever. You just want it's like a good inspiration. But we just need to move a little bit more. Why do we need to exercise? Why do we need to move? It wards off disease also. It decreases risk of mortality from most diseases. It improves circulation. Now, when you bring in food into your body, you want it to circulate through your body. Like the lymphatic system only moves through muscle movement. The muscle pumps the lymph throughout your body. And your lymphatic system is the essence of your immune function, right? So you want to just pump your muscles and get that lymph flowing through your body so you can not only remove all the toxins from your blood, but you could also deliver the nutrients to them. That's important too. HDL, one of the only ways to raise HDL is from exercise. And it also helps lower the LDL, the bad, the lousy cholesterol, and it also helps lower total cholesterol. It helps with weight loss maintenance. It's not the most important thing for weight loss, food is, but weight loss maintenance, you need exercise to be included. Other benefits, it improves, isn't he cute? It improves mood, improves sleep, stress reduction, increases bone and muscle density. That's the only way you can keep your bones really strong. That's the most important thing. Decreases blood pressure, enhances insulin sensitivity for diabetic patients, and for everyone, improves immune function. So what fits your busy schedule better? Exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? So how do we implement it into our daily life? Find something you love. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I hate jogging, I hate it, I'm not gonna do anything, it's miserable. Well, but do you like dancing? I love dancing. Well, go take a dance class, or just turn on music and dance. It doesn't require anything fancy. You don't need any special equipment. When I was personal training while I was in graduate school, I would go to my clients' homes. I did in-home personal training, and they'd have their kids there or whatever, and I would just kind of improvise. Like I would take a kid and we would bench press the kid, or we would take a step and we would use a step to do step aerobics. Like there's always something you could do no matter where, and I've worked in all sorts of environments, from little apartments, big houses, backyards, outside, hot, cold. There's always something you could do. Just find something you love and just do it. Experiment with new things. Now online you can get any kind of activity or class you could ever possibly want, but chase adaptation. You don't want your body to ever go, oh yeah, I'm doing my same 60-minute walk today, because your body will adapt. And the whole point of staying on top of that is keeping it different. Shake up your body, strengthen your muscles and your bones by hitting it hard every day. Do something every day, move every single day. Take the stairs. Okay, I'm totally, and park as far away as possible. Like, I go to the gym, I'm like a gym rat, I love going to the gym, but I'm guilty of trying to find the best parking space at the gym. I don't understand the thinking behind that, but I'm trying to be better and park farther away. Now that I have my step counter, those steps count. Walk up the escalators. If you can't find the stairs, walk up the escalators. Walk instead of stand, instead of sit, instead of lie down. Just the more activity, the more you move, the better your body will feel. It feels good to me. I know we've been sitting here all weekend, so we're all gonna go out, we're gonna hopefully move a lot. But I schedule it into my calendar. It is on my calendar. I will not say, I tell people I have a meeting, but really I'm going to the gym. Like I need to get that workout in, because otherwise, you know what? You're not gonna get it in. If you don't schedule it, it will get lost. And the final tenet is to master mindfulness. And that's what we were talking about with eating, but it goes along with everything. Just connecting to nature, connecting to yourself, being present. That is the essence of health, is being present and making conscious choices about moving, about eating healthy, and taking care of yourself. Stress is very powerful, not as powerful as diet and exercise, but it is very powerful and it can destroy your health as well. So you need to manage your stress however. Now I like to think of it actually like this. There's two ways of managing stress. There's the release part of it and there's the restorative part of it. So the release part of it is exercising is great for that, because you're getting that stress out. When you have stress, you don't want to keep it inside your body. Talking it out, talk it out. Therapist, a friend, your dog, whoever will listen, talk to yourself. It doesn't matter, just talk. Taking a walk, getting out in nature really helps. I tell my son has this little temper. He's a little 8-year-old, and he's got this energy, but he has this little temper. I don't know where he gets it from. It's not for me, right, honey? It's not for me. It must be from you. No, but he has this little temper, and he's like broken walls in our apartment. Like he's like broken the door. So now I tell him to go punch a pillow, and he does. He goes in, he gets mad. I'm like, go punch a pillow, and he's fine. And he goes in his room, and he punches his pillow, and he comes out. He's like, sorry, mommy, and he's all better. And I found it's a really effective tool for him. He's 8. Hopefully he'll learn more communicative things and exercise later. Also, martial arts and yoga, just any way where you could really use your body is a good way to release the stress. But then you also want to think of restoring yourself and like the other element of stress reduction, like maybe just going out in nature, taking a hike, taking a hot bath can be really empowering. You know, water is very healthy. Water is very like spiritually connected and very, very healthy. Listen to music, that helps a lot. Time in nature, time with animals. Honestly, when I look at my dog and I'm in the middle of a crazy day and he just sitting there being a dog, and I think, oh my gosh, just being a dog, just be yourself, just relax. Sleep is also important. This is when you repair. So you may be putting in all these nutrients and all this wonderful stuff. You may be exercising and beating up your muscles and breaking down your muscle tissue, but it's when you sleep that you recover, repair, and you build up your muscle thicker, stronger, better. So we need to have sleep. A lot of us don't sleep well enough. You know, we need it for our psychologically, physically. It converts our short-term memory into our long-term memory. It's a very important thing that we need to kind of prioritize. Now, of course, there's a lot of controversy on how much you sleep. Apparently, everyone has slightly individual needs. I know I need 6 hours. Some people need a little bit less or a little bit more. But the research kind of generally averages that we need about 6.5 to 7.5 hours per night. So really, you just had to look at the puppies one more time, because that's a great way to reduce stress and, you know, relax. And in conclusion, a Mediterranean diet, it's good. It seems to be good. A whole food plant-based diet, vegetarian or otherwise, is much better. It's optimal. And I wanted to end on this quote. You guys know Dr. Michael Greger? Love Dr. Michael Greger from nutritionfacts.org. So he said this last year in his talk, and I think this sums up healthcare in a nutshell. The best kept secret in medicine is that under the right conditions, the body can heal itself. So I don't know if I have time for questions or if we could keep it for the panel. Okay, we'll save it for the panel. Thank you very much.